The planet of silence. The stars were fading in the black sea of space when Captain Elias Vorn finally saw his destination, Varela 9, a small gray planet that hung in the void like a forgotten memory. Everyone said it was worthless, a dead rock with nothing but ruins. But for only 100 credits it was now his. He smiled slightly, thinking how cheap dreams could be bought in this part of the galaxy. Elias was not a soldier anymore, he was an explorer, a trader. And sometimes a man running from his own past. His old ship, Nomad's Grace, rattled as it entered orbit. The engines groaned, the lights flickered, and the old navigation system spoke in a broken tone. Surface conditions, stable but lifeless. That word, lifeless, echoed in his mind like a dare. He lowered the ship into the atmosphere. Dust rose in waves beneath the landing gear. The planet looked like a graveyard of metal and glass. Skeletons of towers reached into the clouds, shattered and hollow. The wind moaned through empty streets like a ghost whispering old stories. Elias stepped out, his boots sinking into gray dust that once might have been a city square. He looked around, scanning the ruins. The air was thin but breathable, a good sign maybe. He activated his wrist console and the scanner began to hum. The display showed nothing alive, not even bacteria, but then a faint blip appeared for a second, one single pulse. Then silence again. He frowned, adjusting the frequency. The signal returned, weaker this time, but real. Could be a leftover energy cell, he muttered to himself. But something about it didn't fit. The rhythm of the signal felt organic. Like a heartbeat, his brow furrowed. That can't be right. He followed the direction of the reading through the ruins, stepping over collapsed metal and burned-out vehicles. The architecture was alien, yet strangely familiar. Elegant spirals mixed with harsh angles. Colors faded by time. He imagined what this place once looked like. Bright lights, alien laughter, families. Then the silence reminded him that all of it was gone now. As he entered a large dome that once served as a civic hall, his flashlight caught a glint of something. A metallic panel was half buried in rubble, ancient symbols carved across it. He brushed off the dust and realized it was a door. Behind it, the scanner's pulse grew stronger. His heart began to race. He tapped his comms. Nomad. Keep engines warm? The ship's AI chirped back. Acknowledged. Captain, Elias used his portable cutter to melt through the lock. The metal hissed and split open, revealing a dark passage below. The air that escaped was cold, too cold. He descended slowly. The walls covered in vines of frost and glowing circuitry. The signal was louder now, beating in steady rhythm like a pulse beneath the earth. At the end of the tunnel, he found an old chamber filled with shattered screens and broken glass tubes. It looked like a laboratory or maybe a shelter. His scanner began to beep rapidly. He moved closer to a large pod in the center of the room. Its glass was cracked, its lights fading. Inside was a shape, small and fragile. A woman, or something like one, her skin pale blue. Her chest rising weakly. Elias froze. That's impossible, he whispered. The pod flickered again, and the woman's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, her gaze met his through the glass. She whispered something he couldn't understand, but her tone carried pain and fear. He quickly tried to stabilize the pod's power using his suit's portable cell. The light steadied and the woman's breathing slowed. He looked at her again, realizing she was not just alive. She had been waiting. Then his earpiece crackled. A faint voice, not from his AI, not from his comms, but from the room itself. A soft whisper echoed through hidden speakers. Please, don't hurt my child. Elias turned sharply, scanning the shadows. His weapon came up by reflex, but the voice repeated, weaker this time. My child. Please, he realized it wasn't coming from her lips. It was an old transmission, centuries old, playing again now that power had returned. A small light blinked beside the pod. An ancient console still running. He tapped it gently, and a holographic image shimmered to life. It showed the same woman, standing tall, holding a small child wrapped in cloth. Her message began, her voice shaking. To whoever finds this, we are the last of Varela. My people are gone, but I cannot leave. Not while my son still breathes. The recording ended in static. Elias stood there in the cold silence, realizing he wasn't just standing on a dead planet. He was standing in the middle of someone's unburied story. Outside, the wind howled again, carrying dust and echoes through the ruins. The stars above the cracked ceiling glimmered faintly as if listening. Elias whispered softly to himself, "You're not alone anymore," and placed his hand on the glass of the pod. The woman's pulse steadied. The planet trembled faintly beneath his feet. And in that moment, Varela 9 breathed again. The man who bought a dead planet for 100 credits had just awakened something that should have never been forgotten. The last signal. The cold chamber hummed softly as old circuits flickered to life. Elias stood still for a long moment, watching the faint mist rise from the stasis pod. The alien woman's breathing had steadied, her chest rising and falling like a rhythm from another world. The pod was ancient, far beyond any technology he had seen, yet it still clung to life as if powered by sheer will. Elias adjusted his wrist console, connecting it to the alien device. The interface was strange, fluid and organic. It didn't respond to touch but to pulse. Every time his heart beat, the machine reacted, matching his rhythm like it was learning from him. "What are you?" he whispered under his breath. The holographic console sparked again and another recording began to play. This one was older, the voice weaker. "If anyone hears this, we couldn't save them," the alien woman spoke. "The storms came, the sky burned, and the stars turned their backs on us." Her eyes in the projection were full of tears. "But if you find me, please, save my son. He carries our world's last light." Elias replayed it twice, trying to decode the alien symbols that appeared with the message. Most were damaged, unreadable, but one symbol repeated again and again, a spiral of light surrounding a small dot. He stored it for later analysis. Suddenly, a new sound filled the room, a faint cry not from the recording, but from behind the broken console. Elias turned sharply, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Behind the rubble, a smaller pod was half buried, its surface cracked, leaking faint streams of glowing mist. Inside was something small, a child motionless but alive. Its skin shimmered faintly with the same blue light as the woman's. Elias's heart pounded. "Two survivors," he muttered. He reached forward, brushing away the dust. The pod's life indicators were red, power failing fast without thinking. He pulled his power cell from his own suit, connecting it directly to the pod. Sparks flew, and for a second everything went dark. Then light flooded the chamber again. The pod system stabilized, and the child took a small breath. It wasn't human, yet something in the way it breathed, the way it moved, and it felt familiar, fragile, alive. Elias smiled faintly. "Welcome back, little one." The main console beeped, forcing his attention. The alien voice returned one last time. "If you hear this, I am gone, but my child remains. Protect him, for in his veins sleeps the core of Varela." The message ended abruptly with static and a sudden surge of energy through the room. Elias looked at the woman's pod again. Her body was still, frozen in time, her life signs weak but stable. He understood now. She wasn't speaking to him. She had been speaking to anyone across centuries, praying someone would find them. He checked his scanner again. The reading was strange. Both bodies emitted an unknown radiation, slow and rhythmic, pulsing like the heartbeat of the planet itself. He moved to the surface to get a better signal, carrying his datapad full of readings. When he stepped outside, the wind had changed. The sky above was no longer gray but streaked with faint lines of light, blue auroras dancing across the horizon. The air felt warmer, like the planet itself was responding to something awakening. Elias stood at the edge of the ruins and looked up. For a moment, he thought he heard whispers carried by the wind, voices layered over one another, in a language he didn't know. They weren't mechanical. They were alive. He tapped his comms. "Nomad, start deep scan of planetary core." The AI replied. "Detecting energy anomaly, unknown origin. Spreading from your current position." He frowned, looking back toward the ruins. "She said her son carried the core of Varela," he murmured. His mind began to race. Could it be that the child's existence was tied to the planet's life force itself? A low rumble shook the ground. Dust fell from the broken towers, and Elias instinctively ducked. His scanner flashed with new readings. Bioenergy reactivation, surface heating, tectonic pulse. The planet was waking up. He rushed back to the chamber. Finding both pods glowing faintly, the woman's eyes fluttered open again. Brighter this time, she looked directly at him, her lips moving. This time he could hear her voice. Not from the recording, but from her. "You human?" Elias froze, then nodded slowly. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm human." Her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Human? Destroyers, she whispered, her voice cracked with pain. You came back. Elias's breath caught. No, I'm not here to hurt you, he said quickly, raising his hands. I found you, that's all. She shook her head weakly, her eyes shimmering with tears. You always find what you destroy. Before he could respond, the chamber lights dimmed. The child's pod pulsed with brilliant light, sending a wave of energy through the entire structure. The consoles came alive, thousands of alien symbols appearing on every surface. The old computers began to project holographic stars, fleets, explosions, a war long gone. Elias watched in silence as the truth began to unfold. Humanity had been here before. Centuries ago, he didn't understand yet. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just a rescue. It was a rediscovery of something humanity had buried deep in history. As the lights faded again, Elias whispered to himself, what did we do here? The alien woman looked at him one last time before her eyes closed again. Save him, she whispered. Save my son. And maybe, save yourself. Outside, the auroras grew brighter, painting the silent sky in blue and gold. Elias looked up and realized that he was no longer standing on a dead planet. Varela 9 had just started breathing again, and somewhere deep inside its heart, the ghosts of the past were beginning to stir, the alien mother. The hum of the stasis pods faded into an uneasy silence. Elias stood between the two, staring at the faint blue light that pulsed beneath the alien woman's skin. Her body seemed fragile, her frame slender like carved glass. Yet there was something unyielding in the way she clung to life. He had seen many survivors across the galaxy, but none like her, none who had waited for centuries. He gently adjusted the power link to her pod. The device responded, faintly humming to his touch. Her eyelids fluttered again, this time longer, slower, and when they opened, the glow in her irises deepened like starlight trapped in water. She looked at him, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as if she had seen his kind before. Human, she whispered weakly, her voice trembling through dry lips. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation wrapped in sorrow. Elias hesitated, his throat tightening. He didn't want to lie. Yes, he said quietly, but I'm not here to harm you. Her breathing grew shallow, her gaze drifting toward the smaller pod beside her. She raised one trembling hand and placed it gently against the glass. My son, she whispered. Please, is he safe? Elias nodded, his voice softer now. He's alive, I gave power to his pod, he's breathing. At that, tears slipped down her cheeks, glistening like liquid light. She murmured words in her own language, soft and rhythmic like a prayer. Then she looked back at him, her voice barely more than air. Why did you return? After the fire? Elias frowned. Return? What fire? Her eyes darkened and the memory of centuries reflected in them. You don't remember, she said bitterly. Humans came from the sky, bringing light that burned. They said they were saving us, but they left ashes behind. Elias felt his heart twist. He had heard stories of old wars, but never this one. He crouched beside her pod, lowering his weapon and speaking calmly. I wasn't there, I didn't know, I'm here alone, just a traveler. I found this world empty. She studied him in silence for a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his voice. Finally, her expression softened. You speak not like them, she said. Your voice carries remorse. He nodded. Because I see life and I protect it. Her eyes closed briefly and her breathing steadied again. Then perhaps, the stars have given me mercy. Elias checked the readings. Her vitals were stabilizing. The stasis field was no longer collapsing. The planet's energy seemed to be channeling itself toward this chamber. The readings were strange, organic, and electrical at the same time. He activated his wrist console, sending a command to Nomad's Grace to start a deeper geological scan. Nomad, he said, trace the origin of this energy surge. It's feeding into the pod somehow. The AI replied, energy source detected. Planetary core, Captain. This planet's mantle shows signs of partial reactivation. Elias blinked. Reactivation? Confirmed, Captain. Planet Varela 9 appears to be alive. The words sent a chill through him. He looked back at the alien woman, her glowing veins, her child's faint pulse, and suddenly, it all made sense. They weren't just survivors. They were part of the planet's lifeblood. Their species might have been symbiotic with their world, and their survival had kept it from dying completely. He turned back to her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered. "Lyra, Lyra," he repeated gently. "I'm Elias, I'll help you." "I promise." Her gaze softened at his tone. She looked toward the cracked ceiling, where faint blue light shimmered like veins across stone. "Varela hears you," she said faintly. "She knows your heart." Elias was still trying to process her words when his console beeped again. "Incoming transmission, unknown source." The message wasn't human. It was the same voice as before, only this time it wasn't a recording. The holographic projectors around the chamber came alive, showing broken fragments of memory, battlefields of fire, cities crumbling, and massive human warships hovering above alien towers. A voice echoed, deep and cold. "Purge complete, no life detected. Authorization, Human Command 7A. Elias felt the color drain from his face. "That's human protocol," he whispered. "Centuries old." Lyra flinched at the sound. Clutching her chest, "That voice," she said weakly. "It was the voice that ended us." Elias shut down the projection quickly. Guilt flooding him, though it wasn't his war, not his decision. Yet he carried their name. Human. The destroyers who had turned a thriving world into silence. Lyra turned her head slowly toward him. "You are not them," she said softly. "But their blood runs through you. Will you finish their work? Or undo it?" He met her gaze, his voice firm. "I'll undo it, I swear." Her lips trembled into the faintest smile. Then, "You may yet save more than me." The chamber began to tremble again. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ground beneath them vibrated with a deep hum. The pod started glowing brighter, not from power input, but from within. The child's light grew stronger, spreading like a pulse through the walls. Elias looked around in awe. The dead circuits, the walls, even the air itself began to shimmer. "What's happening?" he asked. Lyra smiled faintly, her strength returning for the first time. "He's waking, my son. He feels you. He feels your heart." The light intensified until the whole chamber glowed like dawn. The consoles burst alive, displaying thousands of alien glyphs moving too fast to read. Elias shielded his eyes. The air grew warm, and for a second, he thought he heard whispers, not in words, but in emotions: joy, pain, memory, hope, all merging as one. When the light faded, the child was awake, his small eyes glowing silver. His first breath filled the air with a pulse of soft wind. Lyra reached out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My child, my world." Elias stepped back slowly, feeling the pulse echo through his chest. The planet had reconnected with its heart, and now it was no longer silent. The man who came to buy a dead world had just witnessed a mother's miracle, and somewhere deep in the soil of Varela, something ancient, something powerful, had begun to stir. The Forgotten War, the dawn on Varela 9, was not like any other Elias had seen. The horizon glowed faintly with silver fire, and the wind carried a sound like voices humming beneath the soil. The ruins that once looked lifeless now shimmered with faint veins of light. The planet was breathing again, slowly, painfully, like someone waking after centuries of sleep. Elias stood outside the chamber, his eyes scanning the skyline through the dust. The data on his wrist console flickered wildly. The energy signature was spreading across the crust. "Nomad, confirm planetary pulse frequency," he ordered. The ship's AI responded. "Frequency confirmed, Captain." Synchronized with organic biosignature from the two survivors. Planetary core reacting in resonance, he frowned. "So they're connected. The planet, Lyra, and her son, affirmative, Captain. Their life signs are amplifying the planet's magnetic flow. Estimated source age over 900 years. 900 years. Elias thought. That meant humanity's involvement here wasn't ancient myth. It was a deliberate act, a war buried by time. He turned back into the chamber. The light had dimmed, and Lyra sat beside her son, cradling him gently. The child's silver eyes reflected the holographic stars from the ceiling. He looked peaceful, yet there was power in his presence, a kind of calm that made even the machines hum in rhythm. Lyra looked up as Elias entered. "The stars remember your kind," she said quietly. "But they also remember what was lost." Elias knelt beside her. "I need to know what happened, Lyra. Why would humans destroy your world?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing over her child's forehead. "Because they feared us," she whispered. "They called us core bearers, the heart of worlds." "Core bearers?" Elias repeated. "Yes," she said softly. Our people were born with connection to living planets. We did not build them. We grew with them. Our emotions shaped their balance. Our songs fed their skies. We healed what others broke. She paused, her expression darkening. But your kind saw danger. They saw power they could not control, and so they came with fire. Elias looked down, guilt twisting through him. We never learned this. None of our history mentions Virella or your people. Lyra nodded slowly. Because you erased it, not just from records, but from memory. The Council of Terra ordered the silence of Virella. They said the core bearers would never be spoken of again. He stared at the floor, his hands clenching into fists. So this planet was sacrificed for fear. For fear and greed, she said. Your people wanted our cores. Our energy could power fleets. Reshape worlds. Humans took what they wanted. Until the planet screamed. Her voice trembled as she remembered. When the skies burned, we sang to calm Virella. But the song was broken. The connection shattered. I was the last to hear her voice before the silence. Elias swallowed hard. And your son? He was unborn when the fire fell, she whispered. I gave him my link, my bond, to keep Virella's heart alive. That's why she sleeps no more. He is her pulse. The realization struck Elias with force. The child was not just her son. He was the living key to an entire world. Without him, Virella would die again. He exhaled deeply. Then the ones who come after me, they'll want him too. Lyra looked at him, her eyes narrowing. Others? Elias nodded grimly. If anyone detects these energy waves, scavengers will come, or worse, the Galactic Council will. They'll see this planet as a weapon or a resource. Her expression hardened. Then you must leave. He shook his head. No, not without protecting you both. She stared at him for a long moment, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. You speak like someone who has lost his own home. Elias looked away, his jaw tightening. Maybe I have. The ship's AI interrupted through his comms. Captain, long-range scanners detect multiple ships entering the outer orbit of Virella 9. Unregistered IDs, probable scavenger signatures. Elias cursed under his breath. They're faster than I thought. Lyra rose slowly. Her body still weak, but her presence commanding. Then we fight. Elias blinked. You've been asleep for centuries. You can barely stand. Her eyes glowed faintly. I do not need strength, she said. I have the world. The ground beneath their feet trembled as if answering her call. The veins of light across the floor brightened, stretching outward through the ruins. Elias watched as the walls came alive with glowing patterns, ancient symbols igniting like stars. What are you doing? He asked, calling her. Lyra said softly. Calling Virella. A deep sound rumbled from below, a heartbeat echoing through stone and air. The dust on the ground began to swirl upward, forming spirals of light. Outside, the wind roared, and the horizon flickered with blue energy. Elias rushed to the console, reading impossible data. The core is responding to you. Lyra smiled faintly, her voice like a whisper carried by centuries. No, Elias Vorn, she is responding to us. Outside, the scavenger ships entered the atmosphere, their engines lighting the dead sky with red flame. The ruins of Virella stirred like an ancient beast waking from slumber. Elias grabbed his rifle, turning toward the door. If they want this planet, they'll have to get through me first. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes burning with silver light. Then they will learn, she said. What happens when the heart of a world beats again? The wind howled, the ground glowed, and somewhere beneath the crust, the planet's pulse began to thunder louder than the stars. Virella, the world once declared dead, was no longer silent, and neither were the ghosts humanity had tried to erase. The return of the scavengers. The first flashes in the sky looked like distant lightning, streaks of red cutting through the pale silver dawn. Elias knew better. He recognized the pattern. Scavenger engines. They had arrived, hungry for whatever signal Virella 9 had sent into the void. He sprinted up the slope toward the surface outpost, dust swirling around his boots. His visor read half a dozen ships entering low orbit, each marked with crude symbols, pirate clans, salvage hunters, desperate men with no law but greed. Nomad status, he barked into his comms. Shields charged at 60%, the AI replied calmly. Multiple crafts detected. Models indicate heavy salvage rigs and armed haulers. Not military grade, doesn't matter, Elias muttered. Checking his blaster's charge, they've got numbers below him. The ruins pulsed faintly with light as Lyra stepped out from the underground chamber. The alien mother looked stronger now, her eyes glowing silver blue. The child clung to her arm, silent, watching the sky. The ground around them shimmered as faint symbols spread across the soil like veins of light. Elias turned toward her. "They're coming for you." "For him, I know," she said softly, her voice calm. "They always come for what they do not understand." Her words sent a shiver through him. She didn't raise a weapon or shout orders. She simply raised her hand toward the horizon. The faint pulse of the planet grew louder, the air vibrating with a low hum. Elias felt it through his boots like the ground itself was alive. He took a cautious step back. "What are you doing?" Lyra's voice was calm but heavy with power, calling the buried ones. "The what?" "The guardians of Virella," she said. "When the fire came, our people built machines from the bones of the planet itself, sleeping beneath the cities, waiting for her pulse to wake them again." Before Elias could respond, the ground exploded a few meters away, throwing debris into the air. Out of the dust rose something huge, a creature of metal and stone, its body glowing with molten veins of energy. Its head turned slowly, eyes blazing with silver flame. Elias stumbled backward, staring in disbelief. "That thing's alive!" Lyra nodded once. "Part machine, part spirit," she said. "They once defended our world. Now they defend it again." Above them, the scavenger ships broke through the clouds. Weapons glowing red, they began to fire plasma rounds into the ruins. Explosions rippling across the broken city. Elias raised his blaster and shot back, his plasma bolts cutting through the air like comets. But he knew his weapon was nothing compared to what was awakening beneath them. The metallic guardian roared, a deep, shaking sound that echoed through the canyons from the distance. More figures emerged, massive constructs rising from the dust, walking with slow, thunderous steps. The scavenger ships turned their fire toward them. But the blasts only sparked harmlessly against the creature's energy fields. Elias ducked behind a wall. "Lyra, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Her eyes shone brighter. "I am not doing this alone, Elias. The planet remembers you too." Before he could ask what she meant, his wrist console flashed. His ship's systems had synced with the planet's frequency without command. Nomad's grace began to glow with faint blue lines spreading across its hull. "Captain, foreign signal integration detected," the AI said. "My systems are evolving," Elias blinked. "Evolving?" "Yes, Captain. The planet's energy appears to be merging with my framework." The ship's engines roared with new intensity. A beam of blue light shot from its underbelly, cutting through one of the scavenger ships cleanly. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sunrise. Elias watched, stunned. "Nomad. I adapted," the AI said simply, its tone now carrying a strange echo, almost alive. "I am linked to Virella's core, Captain. We are one system now." The planet trembled again, not from damage but from awakening. The Guardians marched toward the horizon, sending shockwaves that cracked the ground beneath the scavengers' landing crafts. Ships crashed, metal screamed, and fire met light. Lyra stepped forward, her child still holding her hand. "Virella forgives nothing. But she remembers mercy," she whispered. She lifted her other hand and the air shimmered. The sky above them rippled like water, and the clouds began to part, revealing not just the blue light of the planet's rebirth, but ancient symbols burned into the stars. Elias looked up and realized they weren't clouds at all. They were energy barriers, part of a planetary defense long dormant. Now alive again, the scavengers tried to flee, but their engines failed as Virella's gravity tightened its grasp, pulling them back down. Some ships disintegrated mid-air, others crashed in flame. The sky rained fire for minutes that felt like hours. When silence finally returned, only the wind remained, carrying the faint hum of the Guardians as they sank back into the soil. Returning to rest, Elias walked slowly toward Lyra, his face lit by the soft silver glow surrounding her and her son. "It's over," he said quietly. "You saved your world." Lyra looked toward the horizon, her voice faint but steady. "No, Elias Vorn," she said. "You saved it with me." He shook his head. "I just fought," she smiled gently. "No." "You believed?" Elias turned to look at the ruins around them, now glowing faintly like veins of a living being. The planet was healing, the dust had settled, and where the plasma had struck, new moss-like growth began to shimmer. Not plant, not metal, something entirely new. He looked down at the child, who stared back with calm silver eyes that seemed far older than they should be. The boy reached out a small hand and touched Elias's wrist console. The display flickered, then changed. Human letters mixed with alien symbols forming one phrase. Together, we live. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had spent years wandering empty worlds, trading, surviving, never belonging, and now here, on a dead planet bought for a handful of credits, he had found something alive, something real above them. Virella's auroras pulsed brighter, casting blue light over the broken landscape. The sky, once scarred and silent, now sang with low harmony. A sound between breath and music. Elias looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Then let's keep it that way." Lyra nodded, her hand resting over her heart. "Virella will remember your name, Elias Vorn. The human who did not destroy, but healed." The ground rumbled once more, not in anger, but in gratitude, and somewhere deep beneath, in the sleeping heart of the planet, a single pulse answered, steady and eternal. The ghosts of Virella had found peace, and the man who came for profit had found purpose. The promise of life. When dawn broke the next cycle, it was no longer gray. The light over Virella 9 was gold now, real sunlight reflecting through clean skies, not the filtered haze of centuries of dust. Elias stood at the edge of a broken ridge overlooking the ruins below, where rivers of glowing silver had begun to flow between the streets. The dead planet was not dead anymore. He removed his helmet, breathing in the thin but sweet air. It no longer smelled like ash, it smelled like rain, a scent that hadn't existed here for 1,000 years. The faint hum of the world pulsed beneath his boots. Steady, calm, alive. "Nomad," he said softly. "Status of atmospheric restoration." The AI's tone was warmer now, less mechanical. "Oxygen levels rising, Captain. 98% of toxic trace elements neutralized. Ecosystem reformation is accelerating at this rate. The planet will support complex life within 1 solar year." Elias smiled faintly. "She's healing faster than we thought." "She's not healing, Captain," the AI corrected gently. "She's remembering, down below." Lyra walked barefoot through the cracked soil that had begun to bloom with strange silver-green plants. Her child followed, laughing softly, the sound echoing across the ruins like the first music Virella had heard in centuries. Everywhere the child stepped, light followed. Elias made his way down to them, watching how the ground seemed to breathe beneath their feet. "You were right," he said as he approached. "The planet was never dead, only sleeping." Lyra looked up at him, the silver in her eyes softer now. "Every world sleeps when it loses its song, Elias Vorn. You helped her remember how to sing again." He crouched near the small child, who was now playing with one of the broken mechanical shards from a fallen scavenger ship. The shard pulsed faintly, reacting to the child's touch, forming shapes, a flower, then a bird. Then dissolving back into dust, the child looked up at him and smiled. Elias grinned. "You're quite something, little one." Lyra knelt beside her son. "He carries Virella's memory, the heart that bridges what was and what can be." Elias nodded. "And now that she's alive again, others will notice, you know that, right?" Lyra's expression grew still. "You mean your people?" He sighed. "Not just mine. The Galactic Council, corporations, scavengers, explorers. Everyone with a scanner within 1,000 light years will see this energy spike." Her gaze turned toward the horizon, where the sky shimmered like a living ocean. "Then we must decide, Elias Vorn, whether to hide or to stand." He leaned on his rifle, staring at the growing light. "If they come, they'll strip her bare, drain her life, and call it progress." Lyra's voice hardened. "Then they will meet the same silence they once gave us." Elias turned toward her. "You can't fight the whole galaxy." "Lyra," she met his eyes without fear. "Can you?" He didn't answer right away. His mind raced with the images of what he'd seen. The Guardians rising from the ground, the planet defending itself. The merging of technology and life, and somewhere in all that, he realized the truth. Virella didn't need an army, she needed a protector, a witness, someone who could speak for her when the stars turned greedy again. He finally said, "If anyone tries to take this place, they'll have to go through me first." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then you are no longer just human, Elias Vorn. You are Virella's guardian." A faint rumble rolled through the air. Not danger this time, but life. New growth sprouted where the battle had burned. Trees of crystal and veins of silver rose slowly from the cracks. Birds of light flickered in the air for the first time in centuries. It was creation unfolding before his eyes, Captain. Nomad's voice interrupted softly. Incoming transmission from the outer relay network. Multiple ships are querying the sector about your signal. They've detected planetary rebirth, Elias exhaled. Then it begins, shall I respond, Captain? The AI asked. He looked at Lyra, who was watching the sky in silence. Her child's hand glowed faintly in hers. No, Elias said. Let them wonder. Let them think it's a myth. Understood, Nomad replied. Transmitting a ghost signal, I'm masking all coordinates. The wind picked up, carrying a sound like distant singing. Elias realized it wasn't coming from the planet. It was the people it once lost. Echoes of their energy drifting through the air like a lullaby. He sat beside Lyra, looking at the glowing valley below. You know, he said, I used to chase profits. Contracts, exploration licenses. I thought every world was just another deal, another number. And now? She asked gently. Now, he said, I think I was always searching for this. Lyra smiled softly. Not a treasure, but a truth, he nodded. A reason. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the wind filling the empty spaces where machines once roared. The child ran between them, laughing, leaving trails of light that faded slowly into the air. Elias tilted his head toward the distant horizon. If humanity learns about this, about what really happened here, maybe they'll change. Lyra's voice was calm. But knowing, humans always change, Elias Vorn. The question is whether they learn. He smiled sadly. Maybe this time they will. The sky above them shimmered again, the auroras deepening into golden light. The stars reflected off the silver soil, and for the first time in ages, Varela looked alive. Beautiful, proud, Elias stood, dusting off his suit. Nomad, he said. Record this transmission, send it to the neutral archives, encrypted. Add one message, recording, the AI replied. Elias looked out at the horizon and spoke softly. To whoever finds this, Varela 9 is not a dead world. She lives, she forgives, and she remembers. Do not come here with greed. Come only if you seek peace, he paused, then smiled. Signed, Captain Elias Vorn, the man who bought a ghost planet and found a living world instead. The transmission ended. The AI stored it deep within its systems. The planet hummed softly, the air glowing faintly around them. Lyra placed her hand on Elias's arm. You have given us a future, she said. He shook his head gently. No, Lyra, you reminded me what one looks like. The child laughed again, and from that sound, new flowers bloomed from the soil, their petals catching the dawn light. And for the first time since the War of Forgotten Centuries, Varela 9 sang to the stars again. The heart of two worlds. The stars above Varela 9 shimmered brighter that night, no longer distant and cold but alive, as if the universe itself had turned its eyes back toward the world it had once abandoned. Elias stood beside the landing ridge of Nomad's Grace, watching the horizon where silver forests now stretched where there had once been ash, the air around him warm, breathing, full of faint luminescent motes that drifted like sparks of memory. It had been 6 months since the rebirth, 6 months since the scavengers were driven away, and the once dead world had learned to live again. The ruins had grown soft edges, vines of crystal wrapping around stone, rivers running where dust had ruled. And above all, peace. Lyra approached quietly, her robe made from woven silver grass shimmering in the dim light. Her son, the heart of Varela, ran ahead of her, laughter echoing across the cliffs. Elias smiled as he watched. He's growing fast, he said. Lyra nodded, her gaze following the boy. He grows with the planet. As she heals, he matures. As she learns, he dreams. They are one heart. Elias looked down at the glowing soil. And when he's grown, her expression turned gentle but solemn. Then I will fade, as all who have fulfilled their purpose do. Elias frowned. No, don't talk like that. You've done enough dying for a lifetime. Lyra smiled faintly. Death is not the end here, Elias Vorn, when we pass. We become part of her again. You call it energy. We call it returning home, he sighed, not arguing this time. There was something sacred in her words, something even he, a man of engines, guns and deals, one could not deny, Nomad, he said softly, tapping his comm. Any new scans? Confirmed, replied the AI, its voice now carrying faint undertones of life, a rhythm that matched the planet's heartbeat. A fleet has entered the outer system. Signatures match Galactic Council patrols. Elias's stomach tightened. They finally noticed. Lyra looked toward the sky. The faint shimmer of distant ships barely visible through the auroras. They come for what they always come for, she murmured. Elias gritted his teeth. I sent them the message. I told them this world wasn't for conquest. Words seldom stop those who've forgotten how to listen, she said. Her tone calm, not fearful. He turned toward her. Then we'll have to make them listen. Lyra smiled. Not cruelly, but with quiet confidence. Not with war, Elias. You cannot save the stars by burning them again. The child ran up to them, holding something glowing in his hands. A small sphere of crystal light pulsing softly. He looked up at Elias and said something in a mix of human and Virellan tongue. Half song, half speech, Lyra translated. He says, he can show them. Elias crouched beside the boy. Show them what? Lyra placed her hand on the sphere. Memory. The air shifted. A pulse rippled outward from the child's touch. And in an instant the entire ridge shimmered around them. Holographic visions formed, not made by machines, but by the planet itself, a living projection of truth. Elias saw it all. The wars, the burning skies. The humans who came in fear and left in shame. The silence that followed, and finally the rebirth. The song of forgiveness that had healed the wounds. Above them, the sky shimmered and the approaching council fleet slowed. Their scanners, tuned to greed, now captured only beauty. Elias knew their instruments were overwhelmed, showing life signatures where there should have been none. He tapped his comm again. Open broadcast, channel open, said Nomad. Elias took a breath, his voice steady. To any vessel in Virella space, when you are witnessing truth, this world is not a relic, not a weapon, not a prize, it is alive, and it remembers what your ancestors did here. You can choose to fear it, or you can learn from it. But if you come with harm, you will not survive its heart. Silence followed. Then through the static, a single council voice replied, Captain Elias Vorn, are you claiming this planet? Elias looked at Lyra and smiled faintly. No, he said. She claims herself. Lyra's eyes softened, the aurora light reflecting in her tears. The child reached toward the stars, and the sky responded. Brilliant tendrils of gold light rising upward like a heartbeat stretching across space. The fleet above paused, then slowly, one by one, turned away. The war that might have begun ended before it started. Elias exhaled in disbelief. They're leaving, Lyra nodded. Even the stars can feel when a world chooses peace. For the first time in his life, Elias didn't feel like a wanderer anymore. He belonged, not to humanity, not to any fleet or faction, but to this fragile, reborn world that had given him purpose. He looked at Lyra. So what now? Now, she said. You stay or you go, the choice is yours. Virella will remember you either way. He turned toward Nomad's Grace, its hull glowing faintly with living patterns. The ship had changed too, no longer just metal and code, but something more. Nomad, he said quietly. How long could I stay before the universe forgets me? The AI answered softly. Captain, the universe will never forget what it learns to love. He smiled at that. A slow, tired, peaceful smile, and turned back toward Lyra and her child. The air around them pulsed with life. The soil shimmered beneath their feet, and in the distance, waterfalls of light poured from the mountains. He knelt beside the boy, placing a hand on his shoulder. Take care of her, he said gently. She's the only home you'll ever need. The boy smiled, his silver eyes glowing brighter than the stars. Elias looked up one last time at the heavens. Maybe it's time humanity learned how to listen again, he whispered. And somewhere in the endless dark, Virella's new song echoed, a harmony of metal, soil, heart, and hope, carrying the memory of a man who bought a dead planet for 100 credits and gave it back a soul. As the auroras swept across the sky like a heartbeat, Lyra's voice rose softly beside him. Sleep well, Elias Vorn. Guardian of two worlds, the stars shimmered. The planet breathed, and the universe, for the first time in millennia, listened. Virella 9 was alive, and she would never be silent again.